We're having a conversation today with Mark, someone who's truly a legend in residential real estate investment and property management. He's been doing this for many years. He's a pillar in the community, and he's seen everything. So Mark, how did you get into the business? How did it all start for you? What brought you into residential investing and property management?
So when I was in college, I was an advertising major, and one of my jobs for the newspaper was to collect old debts of ads not paid by retailers, and I would get a commission on whatever I collected, and there was hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I was really good at it. I got letters from people saying, "I've never been hounded like you hounded me. Would you like to come work for us and collect money on refrigerators that haven't been paid for?" So I realized that I had a gift. My gift was that I was incredibly persistent about money. I think that came from my parents, who were very conservative children of immigrants, and I uh, always, was not wanting to be owed money by people in life. So it was natural that when it fell into my lap after moving to Dallas, that most of my clients in the marketing business were building infill in inner city condos when the market just basically disappeared in 1984, 85 because there was no money left for condominium financing. They all needed somebody to rent these unsold properties. And that's how I began a property management and leasing business with our specialty on compliance. We were able to collect rent from people that didn't pay anybody else. So I was kind of the Tony Soprano of property management. I never, I just followed the lease. I never did anything that was illegal, unethical, unkind, but I represented mom and pop investors who were losing their shirts through noncompliance if people didn't do what they were supposed to do. So I became very, very focused on helping individual owners realize that they're much too nice to do this themselves. And having somebody in the middle, was so important because the buck should never stop here. It should always be on behalf of somebody else that you're having to do this. And what we were obviously having to do was take this thing to court. I really believe strongly in that in life. I use a stockbroker to talk about investments. I use a CPA to do taxes. I do not want to be the expert in anything, mostly because I don't want to be responsible for it. So I do believe the property manager helps the individual owner more than anything else to stay current on laws. Because since I left this business and retired, I continue to teach the lease for Berkshire Hathaway, and they own Ebby Halliday and other brokers. And I realize that it has gotten so much more difficult to be an investor in the state of Texas, all over the country, because after COVID, tenants who were receiving rights, especially with the ability to not get evicted, needed to find other ways to keep those rights. And there has been a lot of negative landlord legislation that has made it very challenging for mom and pop investors. They need property managers now more than ever before. I believed it then. I believe it 10 times more now. You want to know about my investment experience about owning property? Well, we had about 1,700 properties when I sold the company that I managed. And I used to say that I had more fingers on my right hand than I had owners that actually made money. And I really still believe that. People think they make money, they have cash flow, right? But they forget about when the last tenant stole a refrigerator, broke the air conditioner, or stopped up the toilet, or skipped out. Like, if you really look at it, which is look at your tax return, I think 99% of my owners lost money. My job was to help them lose less money by at least keeping the tenant compliance aspect of this relationship in check. So I find the investment in rental property is far more challenging and difficult to rely on as consistent cash flow. Like we used to use the term mailbox money. Now I guess it would be called ACH money. It isn't as easy as it sounds. You have a property that has a payment of 400 and you're renting it for 1,000, so you're making 600 a month. Well, you forget that every 3 months you're losing a tenant and having to do a make ready. And that's kind of where I came into the role as investor. and started to buy properties that kind of fell in my lap pretty much for literally nothing, and realized that for the most part, it's very challenging to make money investing in real estate. You will lose less money if you have a good management company representing you with the tenant.
So operations are super important, and having a good partner is super important too. Most people hired you after something didn't work out, after they tried it themselves and hit challenges. You were the rescue role, right?
It was a absolute pleasure to take a bullet, fall on the sword. That's what I'm in. The fiduciary responsibility is what I truly would die for. I believe that if you're a doctor, you do that to save lives, regardless of who the people are. And I took that approach with my owners. And I had many owners who would come to me, some with the beginning signs of dementia. And I would literally get so angry that a tenant would take advantage of an owner that it was always my pleasure to go and enforce a lease. I really don't think it's right that people sign leases and then want to change terms. Like, it's just not right. So I looked at myself as a Baptist minister who was literally reading the words of the Bible, and my job was to enforce the what happens if. And that's truly what I think most individual owners are incapable of doing, because the buck stops with them. And it's real hard to do it when you're looking at a tenant in the eye and they're telling you this story. It's much easier if you know that most of them probably are making the story up to manipulate the owner. And I did see that most of the time. It didn't matter. I mean, I was blind to it because I was representing the owner who was losing money, and the tenant was, arguing over something because they got a job they have to take somewhere else. Well, they have a lease. If you lease the car and you have to, lose your license, the car finance company doesn't say, okay, no more payments. The mortgage company doesn't say, don't make your payments. So why would the landlord have no payments because you are getting divorced or you're taking a job out of town or whatever happens? So I feel, to step back to how I wish I would have answered the question, that our real gift was we would not let a tenant sign a lease they didn't understand. And we approached the whole closing of a lease like somebody was buying a house, except it took much longer to sign a lease with us than it would have taken a tenant to buy the house, because they're the mortgage company, they have a finance company, they have millions of people to help them, surveyors. You come in to sign a lease, we're going to go through every paragraph, and I'm going to tell you stories that might happen, that have happened, that could happen, and how you should expect this owner to respond. And when you do that, which is a real commitment and understanding of leases, you're going to reduce greatly tenants who come in and want to argue a point. Now, with regenerative AI, it's even easier because you can even pick it up off of an email when they say, I need to move because I got a job transfer. AI sees the word move, job transfer, they immediately push out to them that aspect of the lease that they signed and initialed, and the conversation we had about what you need to do if you're getting a job transfer, which is obviously to negotiate as part of the job transfer for the landlord to get bought out of the rest of the months of the lease that you have, which has happened to us. We've received checks from a Dallas Stars front lineman who who went to play for the Long Island Islanders, and he had $14,000 left on his lease in Plano, and his relocation package specialist in New York sent the check the next day, $14,000, like it was nothing, because that's what his lease said. And he knew that, and he knew that was the answer he was going to get. And most owners wouldn't think to do that. That was probably the biggest score I ever had, was that easy relo. But I really believe that you have to tell the tenant what they're signing. And I have a real problem with products like a DocuSign where people are not reading it, only initialing and signing it, because that landlord is living with someone who has no idea what they've signed. And if they moved here from any other state, especially a coastal community like California or Maryland, Baltimore, they're going to assume you can't do what you're about to do to them. And that's what's amazing, is that if they don't really understand what the Texas lease is, you're going to be looked upon as doing something probably illegal, and you're not.
That's great, Mark. You've seen a lot. What's the craziest thing you remember?
My favorite classic story is the husband drops off the keys and surrenders the property. So gave me the keys, he gave me his forwarding address, he surrendered the property. And then we go to the property and there's all this furniture there. So we obviously have to get it ready because someone moves in the next day. So we get rid of all the furniture. And then within a few hours, his wife comes in. And I said, your husband just surrendered the keys and, said you can throw away everything left there. And she immediately says, that's my ex-husband and that's my stuff. And of course, the next line is going to be classic. Those were all very valuable collectibles, the furniture junk that we just threw away. So he was setting her up, happened all the time. And we did nothing wrong. Surrender the keys. I mean, we followed the lease, but we ended up getting all the furniture back because the one thing good about our make-ready crew, they always kept everything that was nice. So it was really easy to get everything back to her. But we would see that a lot where we were put in the middle of two battling tenants, and we were always going to be doing something obviously that's bad for one of them. Lots of that. We had tenants who were arguing over pet dander in the carpets and wanting the carpets to be professionally cleaned, and then we would like look at their app and what do they do for their dog groomers? That's what they did for a living. He was a dog groomer, and we thought that was funny.
So property management is definitely not for the faint of heart. Some people are nice, some are not, and some have serious issues or cause real damage. You've seen it
As
all.
long as they're not damaging the property, it's just my job. And I would tell you that it's probably much more efficient for an owner not to even know about some of the stuff we just moved through. Like we didn't obviously treat the carpets because the person was a pet groomer. But we had a lot of interesting things occur that we had to deal with, most of them illegal, but we just dealt with them.
On the investment side, when properties fell in your lap from tired investors, what was your buy box? Were there deals you refused?
Yeah, I typically bought properties that I would only look at properties that I was able to buy for 50 times monthly rent. That was the most I'd ever pay, the most I'd ever pay. So if a property leased for 500 a month, I would want to try to pay less than $25,000. And this, I think you can probably still find in these neighborhoods that I invested in because they never go up in value. And challenging neighborhoods where shit is always shit, it's always going to be about that ratio. Now, things have changed now, and maybe it's 100 times rent, but it doesn't matter. I used to think you make your money when you buy, which you do. But again, if it's a challenging property and it's always going to be a challenging property, it doesn't matter if it's free. You're still going to have to do make readies and fix it and deal with non-compliance on the lower end of the spectrum, which is all that I really have had experience with. Even the stuff that I thought was really nice, I had plenty of troubles there too. So it's just very risky to invest in real estate because of one thing, and that's called the tenant. The house is great, neighborhood's beautiful, but the tenant. Back in the day, and I think I just read something recently that we're still maybe 48th, and I thought we were 50th. We had the lowest credit scores of any state in the country. In other words, Texans non-complied more than any other state. It's just something bold and beautiful about the Wild West that people weren't going to be told what to do. And I guess credit scores were always a little challenging. So I think we probably had more evictions than any other state that I ever dealt with in my experience of meeting property managers from all over the country. We were always taking it to court.
So if someone wants to start investing today, what would you advise? Avoid leverage? Buy nicer homes? What's the smart move?
I never really found success in investing in real estate, and I had at one point 52 paid for homes, never took mortgages, never borrowed money, and never made any money. And it was just because of the tenant. So I guess my suggestion would be to buy fewer but much nicer properties, avoid leverage, though I know most people need leverage to buy real estate, but that's a personal decision. Uh, the quality of the tenant is the most important aspect. Also try to buy bumper proof houses. try to avoid homes that have, kind of delicate air conditioning systems or, window units that could be stolen or swimming pools that people could drown in or fences that are falling apart. I mean, try to buy bumper-proof houses. And that's why I do believe that the strategy of having people buy homes that are built for renters is brilliant because they're using manufactured flooring that is indestructible, which I think is really, really the way to go. Forget carpets. Carpets have no place in rental properties. Manufactured flooring is really durable, fake wood, let's say, looks great, spill on it, can't dent it, gets rid of smells real easy with chemicals. Same thing with paint. I tried to use paint that had a little bit of acrylic in, so it would wash real easy instead of flat paint. Everything we did in doing make readies, we just tried to bumper proof the house, try to make it indestructible, try to make it like I think Honda used to make a car that you could take a hose inside and out and wash it. That's what I want in a rental house because anything less than that, it's too fragile. It's going to delicately break, and all you're going to do is pay for expensive make readies. So that would be my best suggestion: is try to buy homes that are indestructible.
Active investor versus passive investor. What's your view on syndications?
I do think people know what they're doing better than we do. There's great outfits like Invitation Homes, and I have a regular meeting with some of those folks, and I have really a lot of respect for large operators. They understand the challenges, and they really, truly, in my heart of heart, believe that they do good by tenants, much more than sometimes mom and pops can even afford to. So, I do think there is a place to invest with experienced syndicators. Um, I've never done it, but I just know that there's a lot of risk buying one house or two houses unless you have really solid luck with the tenant.
What about development deals versus value add versus buying older homes? What strategy makes the most sense in today's market?
It's always easier if you're obviously in it from the beginning and if you are handy and you could help maybe do the make ready or do the flip. I do think there's success with people who do it themselves and just buy it right and fix it up and either flip it or lease it. I've seen a lot of beautiful homes, especially that are being flipped, that have manufactured flooring and they're really well designed to be rentals. I think there's just so much risk when you're buying someone else's house that is, you know, crooked and stuff that, which is what I did, that I never realized that was probably a fundamental flaw, that I was buying bad properties. But they were really cheap. I mean, you asked for a story. I want to tell you a story, but the first rental property I ever bought, it was in November of 1983. I bought a one bedroom, one bath, a condominium at 1810 North Garrett for $45,000. And it was, back in the day. And 10 years to the week, like I bought it on November 3rd, and 10 years later, like on November 6th, I bought a two bedroom, two bath property. This is 1993 on the same street, Garrett, and I paid $4,500. So it just shows you in 10 years, the value went down 90% and I got an extra toilet. And like seeing that, which was where I came from, it was very hard to go back up to 45,000. And I bought dozens of properties for less than 10, $15,000, which you would think, how could you lose? Well, it's easy to lose. The rents weren't very high. The properties weren't well maintained. There were special assessments from the homeowners association. Most of them were in neighborhoods of East Dallas that were going through gentrification. And, condos were hard, but I did find a way to rid myself. And this could be a good advice for your listeners. And that is, you sell the property to the tenant because it's a lot easier being a mortgagee than it is to be a landlord. You're not having to make repairs. It's their problem if somebody moves out. All they have to do is pay the mortgage payment and then the taxes and insurance, which obviously you want to make sure gets paid.
Active versus passive, time versus money. How should new investors think about that?
I found that at the end of my career, the only thing I wanted to keep when I retired was a handful of notes, which I eventually sold because even those weren't fun when a tenant, when the mortgagor didn't make a tax payment and I had to chase him. I said, well, this is what I retired. So I did sell them, but they were definitely less work than rentals to buy it. So part of my math was if I paid 25 times rent on a $500 house, I was paying $25,000, then I can sell it to the tenant a year and 1 day later for $50,000. So I've doubled my money at a 10% mortgage for 30 years. So I've created from 25,000, I've created like 350,000 if they make it that long. I've never had one that I kept that long, but on paper, it really made sense. And I did do that better than I did in holding rentals. I found once I was out of the repair part of it, to be a mortgagee was much more enjoyable.
Let's talk red flags. What were the biggest warning signs that made you walk away from a deal?
I would get portfolios and I get really excited, and I immediately get in the car and I, drive by them. And then you just knew that when the seller says, I can't bother the tenants for you to inspect them, then there was something wrong. There's something smelled bad. They didn't have the right lease that wouldn't allow me to do that because the leases that we use, as realtors, which was the TR lease when I was a realtor, I mean, these were hard and fast leases. It's the only lease you want to use because paragraph 14 allows you to show it to prospective buyers. So I never would understand when I'd run into obstacles on buying properties that shouldn't be obstacles. And anytime I had a red flag, it would emit an odor to me that just walk, just walk. So I definitely, uh, if it was too much trouble, I didn't really pursue it. It wasn't like I was buying, Rockefeller Center. It was just a rent house, and they were a dime a dozen. If there was something off, I I mean, I had everything happen to me. I once bought a property, and the woman who sold it to me actually sold me a different property. Like what she had advertised was different than what it was that I bought. And I had to get an attorney and get her to give me the property that I actually did buy. I had another story where I bought a property where there was a Section 8 lease at 650 a month that was, I thought, performing. Well, what she didn't tell me was it had been abated the month before she was selling it to me. So I buy it on a Monday, and Tuesday I get a letter saying no more rent from Section 8 because you didn't do the repairs and the property's being abated. Another, red flag that you should probably deal with. I find the greatest thing an investor can do is interview the tenant they're about to inherit. Is you just knock on the door and have a conversation. How is the repairs? How's the property? You think you're going to be staying here? Because the seller is going to paint that in the rosiest way possible so you close. And I find when I look back in life, I could have gotten a lot of my answers if I would have just talked to the tenant before we closed. And if the landlord doesn't want you to do that, that's another red flag.
Landlords often say, don't disturb the tenants. But those tenants are about to become your tenants.
They're going to be my tenant.
If someone has a fresh $100,000 today, what would you recommend they do with it?
Well, I do think that the inherent value in North Texas is land. And you should try to buy lot value properties for lot value that happen to have a house on it that you could maybe get a tenant in there to at least pay you some rent. And this is what University Park survived on for years. We would have these properties that, if you went, they would fall over, but the lot value was really why the investor would hold them. My most successful investor was a gentleman who passed away a few years ago named DJ White. He was brilliant. He would buy busy corners where there were really ugly houses in great neighborhoods. And he would just hold them. And, they were old houses, but the land was really valuable when the builders were kind of buying lots and they eventually get to his. He always made money. And he would then just scrape the house. So there was no like emotion. There was nothing to do. So I kind of look around, even where I live and see houses, and when they appear to be livable homes that you could buy for lot value, well, then you want to try to get a free ride on appreciation of the lot values, and the lot values in good areas generally appreciate just as strongly as an occupied house. But obviously, if you're buying a house on it to live, you're going to pay a lot more.
Dallas gentrification seems like it's taken decades. Why does it move so slowly?
Yes, that's where my first office was, 2712 North Henderson. So I was in East Dallas starting in 1985, and I had properties there all the way until we retired. It was where we started our business was in East Dallas, and I totally agree with you. Gentrification takes a lot longer. And why East Dallas is so hard is it's the one area that has no end point. Oak Lawn, you have Central and you have the tollway. So you really have like, here's your spot. East Dallas, once you get kind of east of Central, it goes on forever. It goes south of 30, it goes east to Sunnyvale. I mean, it's enormous. So there's the gentrification that I see even now as I go south of Ross Avenue towards Baylor Hospital. There are beautiful, beautiful infill developments of townhomes and pockets of good stuff, but it's not 100%, not like Oak Lawn.
So let's talk about Anthony. Anthony was a great guy. You learn a lot meeting people, and in this business, everyone brings a different angle. Who were the important people you learned from? I've learned a lot from you, from Bernie, and from Anthony. What were the lessons you picked up from others? The things you wouldn't have figured out on your own? Those pearls of wisdom that really stayed with you?
So you need to know if you own rental property, the most important thing is obviously you hire a management company, and this management company should be customer service oriented. The tenant is your customer. The tenant's lease is going to come up for renewal, and it's like having a renewal in your marriage. You really want to do really good things those last couple of months before the renewal. And I really always treated my tenants like customers. I mean, I could talk a tough guy when someone doesn't pay rent, but that means they've visited outside the box. But if you stay within the box and you are doing what's necessary, landlords really need to be very good and kind to their customers. So I learn a lot from companies like Apple Computer, where I just dial 1-800 my Apple and I talk to someone, they fix my computer. That I really believe that you need to be responsive. And as much as I respect AI and all of the ways that our industry has moved offshore, I think one of the most important aspects of the business we ran was that someone always answered the phone, and you could usually talk to me if you needed to. It didn't matter. I would, be able to answer your question, and we'd send you a copy of your lease and we'd highlight whatever you wanted. I mean, it was always very, very transparent. And I think that's the danger of our industry right now is everything has become very impersonal. So tenants just have to fester and get angry and take action. So my best mentors were companies that were, as I like to say, big enough to serve you, but small enough to know you. And I think that's an important common term used for well-run organizations. So I did learn whenever I was well cared for as a customer that that's the business I'm in. Even though they may not like the answer to the question, you need to give them the answer and provide them resources and help them maybe find a suitable replacement resident, whatever's necessary. We really wanted to try to keep the tenants in the property as long as possible because that's the most money our investors lost. Time empty is money lost. And we would calculate that the average vacancy costs an investor 3 months rent. And when you realize that, you realize how important it is to take care of your customers so that you have long renewals. Our average tenant was a 27 months, which is great. You sign someone up for one and you get more than two, someone's doing a good job, and we hope it's the management company.
Did you get frustrated with owners who underinvest when plumbing needed replacement or big repairs were required? Did you have zero tolerance for cutting corners?
Zero tolerance. I mean, I obviously I just explained to owners that there's just this has to be done. I mean, it isn't like if you don't want to do it, the tenant's just going to file a lawsuit on the person on the lease, which is you. You own the property. And if they subpoena me, I'm gonna have to tell them the truth that says I told you to do it because you have to do it. So either let me resign because I'm fine, I don't want to be part of this, and you deal with the tenant, or fix it. So I didn't really get involved with my owner's money challenges to the extent I could lend them money, maybe, but other than that, I didn't. It was really not. You had to take, if you own the car, you're investing in Uber, the car has to run. If you own a house, the air conditioner has to work if it's truly broken. And there's so few things that you actually have to fix in Texas. Heating, air conditioning, hot water to 120 degrees, and water penetration due to structural defects. That's it. So if the air conditioner really is just worn out, you probably need to pony up and put in a new air conditioner. And I really had zero tolerance for owners that didn't want to do the right thing.
So you never had to fire owners? Or did you sometimes reach a point where you just couldn't work with someone anymore?
Yeah, mold, Stachyboccus mold, probably 20 years ago was a big deal. People were getting sick left and right, and anything green on the wall, tenants were just going crazy about mold. And we had a tenant who was sick. She, I don't think, was an ordinary tenant, so I think we might have prevailed in court. But the right thing to do for the owner was to clean the coils, of the air conditioner. And he kind of said, I have no money and I'll file personal bankruptcy so that there's nothing that she can get from me, but she probably will name you in the lawsuit also. So, you have the deeper pockets. I'm just telling you the truth. I'm not going to have a problem filing bankruptcy. This happened. He also had a tax lien on the property as well from the IRS. So I knew it was a bad deal. So we did part company and we took care of the tenant to relocate her. Um, that was the only time I ever remember doing it, and it was the right thing to do. It bothered me, but it was the right thing to do. Uh, because once someone is willing to go into bankruptcy, you can't compete with that because we're the only one left standing that has a check that'll clear. And you just want to figure out how the tenant can get far away from the owner.
What would you recommend for new investors getting into the business today?
Well, I don't think you can do this without a management company, even though you think you'll save money doing it yourself, fixing it yourself. Remain anonymous to everybody involved. I don't care if you make the repairs, just be sure you wear a uniform that looks like you're not an owner, but you're truly just a repair person. Because I just think as soon as an owner shows themselves to a tenant, like it's like the thing that comes out of the box. Oh, let me ask you about this and this, and management company won't do any of this. Like God, and the owner should just stay away. I used to tell owners, never visit your properties, never. And they'd say, why? I said, because you don't have the stomach for it, and I don't either. Let's just run the business. So my recommendation to an owner is hire a competent management company, have at least 3 months of rent in escrow for emergencies, and know that you're going to probably have an emergency. Something is going to break, something's going to fall through a wall, a window, uh, and you want to have that money so you don't lose the tenant, especially if it's towards the end of their lease. You'll want the renewal. Always renew the leases, always increase the rents if possible, even a little bit, just enough that it's cheaper for the tenant to pay the rent increase than to hire a mover. Uh, Always be talking to tenants about the benefits of renting, make it easy for them to rent. It's, I think it's far cooler to rent now with this new generation that are so mobile than ever before. And the more you could do to put in like television mounts above all the fireplace areas or in the bedroom where you want the hole in the wall to be, just go ahead and put the mount up and just leave it there. It's a $35 mount. But if the tenant starts pulling the mounts in and out, they're going to have these huge volleyball holes and you're going to be sheetrocking it and fighting them over the deposit. Like those are the things that we think about as management companies that you don't, that are truly cost savings. It is cheaper to put in a $35 TV mount where you want it to be than have each tenant decide where they want it to be and put molly bolt holes in the sheetrock that then you have to argue with them and their deposit in sheetrock all the time. Don't ever have mandatory pet fees. A lot of deposits you see are non-refundable. Well, that's stupid. That's just asking the dog to shit on the carpet before they move out because they're not going to get the money back. I mean, give the tenant back the money, empower them. We would send the tenant checklist saying if you follow this checklist, here's the pictures when you moved in, here's the checklist, you're going to get 100% of your deposit back. And 70% of our tenants had at least 2 months security deposit in escrow because they had defective credit. Remember, I talked about how tough it was. We're able to do that because we have consistent qualifying standards. And if somebody's credit was less than whatever the number you want to pick, let's say 600, as long as you're consistent, you can then say the owner would approve you if you put up a double deposit. So we had huge deposits on these properties to protect our owners. But I would never have a non-refundable portion of that. I wanted the tenant to get every penny back, and 95% of our tenants got 100% of their deposits back. And I believe that's because we sent them the checklists. Follow this, call this person, need a maid, need carpet cleaning, need paint touch up. Here are all the people to call. You don't want us to call them or the owner to call them. So let the tenants do it and make sure they know they have to return 2 garage door openers, 2 sets of keys, whatever it is, make it easy for your customer to succeed. Make it easy for your customer to succeed.
That's great feedback. Thank you. Investors really should hire a good manager.
I'm a manager more than an investor, but to investors, just hire a good manager because these are the things you don't even think about, and there's 100 others I'm not even getting to. You really have to know that managing the rental property when you're the owner directly with the tenant is the single stupidest thing an investor could ever do. And I don't mean to be so direct, but I have nothing to gain except a lifetime of experience. Please know that I paid my management company every month 10% of the rent just so I didn't have to be the owner when a tenant came in. That it was just this, we had entities for every property, never own anything in your own name. But I didn't want to, I wanted someone else to be talking to the tenant. The manager is the person. That's all they know. The manager and then the name of the entity, which is on the lease. You want to try to remain far away from being identified as the owner of the property. It's much easier for the third party manager to enforce the lease, talk to a tenant about the lease, give them options under the lease. Yeah, and it has gotten much more challenging. The courts now in Dallas have a free lawyer in the lobby assigned to a tenant who is looking for representation before they go into the courtroom. And whereas when we would go to court, we would win 99% of the time. We were very close with all the judges. We gave money to all of their reelection campaigns. We would go to their lunches. We really, really knew how important it was for the judges to look at us as good management companies. And therefore, we would win 99% of the time. Now, tenants win 85% of the time. This all happened since COVID. And you go into Precinct 1, Court 1, which is right up the street, there's a booth there from the Dallas Tenants Association giving a free lawyer, which is great. If the landlord or the owner or the management company doesn't know how to cross their T's and dot their I's, they deserve to lose. But landlords are losing now 85% of the time. It's remarkable. Most of it has to do with how the tenant is served the notice and who is coming to represent that service in the courtroom. Because usually it's the property manager and it's not the same person and it has to be the same person. There's several areas that most of the non-compliance is caught with owners, and a lot has to do with who served the tenant and who has shown up in court that day to represent the landlord.
Where do you see property management and real estate investing going over the next 5 years?
I don't see the consumer getting less rights as a tenant in Texas or in this country. I think it's one of those things you can never take back. It's almost like a union benefit, Once the tenant now has been empowered with so many new rights. I mean, we have for many, many years now, I mean, not many, maybe 10, 12% limit on late fees. And I brought my sign here that I used to have in my office. Like our bread and butter was late charges. I mean, everybody after midnight of the first, we would physically go to their house and let them know that they were late. Well, now you have to give a tenant till midnight of the third before you can even charge the late fee. You still can evict them starting on the second with the process of giving a 24-hour notice, and then the late fee can only be 12% of the rent. So you have constrictions that you have to comply with. And I don't see any state assemblyman saying 12% is not enough for the landlord as a reasonable estimate of their damages. So let's take that away. No, it'll more likely go to 10% or 5% as it is in so many other states. And the grace period now until midnight of the third before they have to pay that late fee, it's not going to go back to the first. It might go to the fifth. So that's the trend. The trend is empowerment of the consumer. It doesn't go backwards. And we've, since COVID, have unfortunately lost so much ground as investors in this state that now more than ever before, you need to know what you're doing.
And where do you see the opportunities ahead?
Well, I do think that notes have call provisions where people have to refinance. Most of the loans that have been done haven't been 30-year fixed. So I think there's always an opportunity when someone has to sell. So that's kind of where I look for it. I think homes that are on the market for an extended amount of time for sale, you still should go talk to the real estate listing agent and say, listen, I'm a cash investor. Again, I say cash investor. I don't care how you close, but it's hard if you're not a cash investor because I find the two things that will get you the best opportunities is to pay cash and to close fast, which, by the way, DJ did that in 1 week. He would close every property in 1 week, all cash. And that was also something very uh, motivational for the seller who just was fed up and just said, yeah, all right, you could have it for $20,000. I'm tired of it. That's still opportunities to be that vulture. I don't think conventional buying is as easy as it's just harder. I don't know if it was ever easy, but here there's always a house that's just been on the market a little bit too long. And I think about it, maybe it's on a busy corner, which was what DJ used to buy. Maybe it's just kind of run down. Maybe it's got a yard that's smaller than normal. All these are great rentals. They're great rentals. You just have to make your money when you buy one. Talking to that listing agent and often being able to pay cash and close fast is the fastest way to get the deal.
Nice. Thank you, Mark. Really inspirational. A lot of great insights and great feedback. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. All right.